little bit more introducing ourselves. We're going to briefly talk about what is technology, try to define that. Easier said than done. What influences the technology choices and types that people tend to use. And then we're going to look at some caregiving challenges and ones that I find in the field that I typically run into with caregivers. And then the typical technology one might use to support someone who has those caregiving challenges. And again, at the end, we'll open it up for some discussion. If there's questions or things that hasn't been answered, we'll move into that. All right, so a little bit more about who we are. That was a great introduction that I already received. And as Allison said, I'm an occupational therapist, and I've been lucky enough to be part of the behavioral response team at the London Health Sciences Centre for the last 4 years. And apart from that, I do work with seniors. I've also, since entering into the profession, become quite exposed to working with seniors in various areas in dementia care, really over the course of my whole career. I want to lay it out there that I am certainly not an expert in technology, but being an occupational therapist, we tend to use interventions or technologies as ways to enable those around us. So it's kind of part of our lens every time we kind of go to do something or assess someone. And it really comes with that next point there. I believe, and a lot of occupational therapists believe, that we all have the ability to do. And the way we do things might differ depending on any challenges or variations to our health and limitations. And I use technology to help those assist others to do in a safer, more efficient way, and also in a more enjoyable way. So trying to use technology to make things easier, but of course, more enjoyable. And so I'm here today. I'm glad that I was asked to present because I want you to know what I do in order to help make your life a bit easier with your caregiving, and also your, if you're working in healthcare, a little bit more knowledge about what you might suggest to your clients. So we'll move it on to Ron. I know he has a good introduction.
Greetings, everyone, and thanks for taking the time out tonight to join us. I'm going to be speaking here from the caregiver perspective. So there's a little bit of a background that I'd like to share. So that's just some contact information. If ever anyone wants to reach out to me, you are welcome as well. And you can kind of see some of the work that I do, and plus many others do, across Canada and internationally in this space. I myself, I have that lived experience. I was a caregiver for over 10 years. That was from around 2007 till 2018. So it was a challenge, but we were able to kind of live life as best as possible. It wasn't perfect, but we were able to live better than maybe how some might live it. And so that's what we're going to be talking a bit about today, but we needed some tools and technologies. So the next thing for me as well was that one group, just in case some people are interested after this presentation, there's one group that's focusing on technology and aging. That is called AgeWell. And there's a link there, or there's the website. And if you were to go to that website, you want to focus on community and then the older adults and caregivers link, okay? So we're always looking for caregivers to share their voices or to participate in some technologies and innovation. So that's over at AgeWell. Okay? The other organization that I'm affiliated with is the Center for Aging and Brain Health Innovation, also known as CABI. That's over at Baycrest. And over at CABI, we're working quite hard to help the innovators that are trying to solve for the challenges related to dementia or caregiving. Again, they're always looking for people to support them, for participants. And one platform they have is called LEAP. And there's a link there where you can join other older adults, other caregivers, with the innovators and researchers to kind of discuss ideas or get feedback and support there, okay? So just a little background about me. I'm quite interested in these topics, but many more. One is aging in place. That's a phrase that a lot of people use. that I know Jenny will use, a lot of occupational therapists. How do we support people to live in the homes and in the places that they want to live as long as possible, okay, or even longer? Age tech is also a word that's being used a lot. So aging and technology. I'm okay with that word, but it is always, sometimes people aren't the biggest fan of that word, but that is something that I do a lot of work in. Age tech, safety. Jenny has a lot of conversation here that you're going to see related to safety. And that's kind of quite important when it comes to tools to help people keep safe. Those that go missing, sometimes we use the word wandering. I'm also into dementia-friendly communities. How do we make not just the inside, but also the outside where we leave the homes better for all of us? Creating better choices. That's for another talk, another day. But the goal is that sometimes in dementia, you feel like that there's no other option, that you're stuck. And we want to show you that there are better choices out there. Maybe not perfect, but there are better choices. I'd like to talk about one day the calculating caregiver. How do you get better at calculating? Sometimes you need someone like an occupational therapist to support you and say, this is why this is a better way of doing this versus that way. And also activities of daily living is something that many occupational therapists, even myself, who's not an occupational therapist, like to talk about. How do I just do the basics of life, from feeding, having showers for my dad, things like that. So that's my personal interest. Just quickly show some of my affiliations. So just to declare any conflicts of interest. One organization I work with is Silverts. So that is an adaptive clothing company. They make adaptive clothing, kind of like this adult brief that has Velcro, stuff like that, that makes life easier. Shoes, slip-on shoes. So that's Silverts. Just plugging it in there. I always say if you need to save a little bit of cash as well, you could use Ron10. Okay, that'll give you 10% off on that site. Another affiliation that I have is Ultimview. And we're going to be talking about some sensors later, but this just happens to be one sensor company that I collaborate with because it converts the person from your image into a stick figure. Okay, so that is Ultimview. And then the last one is a company called WeTrack. These are all Canadian companies. And WeTrack is an app that will help someone locate someone, let's say. There's other apps out there as well that I know, Jenny, you have Life 360 that I believe is much better still, but we have WeTrack. That team is working on a couple cool projects. So that's a little background of who I am coming to the table today.
Amazing. Yeah, wonderful. Thanks so much, Ron. So diving right into it, we're going to, and I think this will be one of the few times, but I want folks, if they can, to go into the chat option and even write one word or an idea that comes to mind about what technology is to them. Because when I started putting together this presentation and thinking about what technology is, I realized that it was much broader than what some might think of in technology. So I'll give a couple seconds. I know we have a lot of content to get through, but if anyone wants to share in the chat, what comes to mind when you're thinking of technology? So any key words?
And Jenny, as people are thinking, I can also add, how do you feel about technology? I'm gonna throw that if that helps some people. Okay. There's some people that I know that I've come across, caregivers, care partners, some of them get a little bit fearful or they're excited. So some of those. Oh, the chat is disabled. People can't put in the chat. I'm seeing it in the Q&A. People can't type into the chat. So this is the beauty of technology sometimes. We'll see how we could get you permission there. So we may have to come back to this there.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Well, actually, so some folks have put their answers here in the Q&A section. So computers is what I think of when regarding technology. That was one answer there. And another person said, for me, technology is advances that make life easier.
Yeah, Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and this might work
Somebody
too.
else said, haha, this is what I think of technology, glitches.
For sure. Yeah. And this might actually be a good forum to put the answers in. We can always figure that out for the next few. But certainly, yeah. So a lot of people tend to think about, they go right to the idea of using computers and doing virtual things as technology. And some of my photos here on the slide, point to some of that. But I'm going to move on to the next slide. So what technology is, according to a definition in the dictionary, is the application of scientific knowledge. So basically using knowledge with the practical aims of human life, or it says to change and manipulate the human environment based on this knowledge. So as you can see, it is quite broad. So it's basically changing, manipulating the environment, applying things to the environment in order to make life easier. And this feeds into my preferred definition. One that I would typically use is that it's using what we know and what we have to make life easier or to help someone to do. And then I know Ron has a definition here as well.
Yeah. So just the easier, I'm smiling here because there are people now in the chat and also in the Q&A saying devices that make daily living easier, right?
Yeah.
And then someone, of course, said, well, technology creates glitches, so smiling at that. So it's not perfect. I'm glad we set that up. It's not about it being perfect. For me, it's about getting a better return on my life and on your life. Okay. So when I talk about returns, I talk about like return on, could be investment, okay? Return on your time. If tonight you come to this presentation and for the next, the time that you're here, the technology doesn't work, then it doesn't give you that return. So I always look at the return. And again, the big one I like to talk about is return on quality of life, is what I kind of throw out to people. That's just my personal interest. Okay. How could it make easier, make life easier, but also how could technology bring you music? Okay. How could it bring the connection so that, all of us are not together physically in a place, but we're, wherever you are. So that's what I'm looking for, is what is that return that you get from technology?
And I'm just seeing a few more here as well. Technology is any tool, including, something as simple as string up to digital devices. Technology is confusing, but a new and necessary way of life for sure. It changes in some instances that can be more time consuming for sure. So this is very, very informative and actually goes right into this slide nicely. So these are just some pictures that actually were card stock that came with the PowerPoint presentation technology itself. And these are examples of technology. And I look at this and I see, there's an anchor, a sailboat, and a set of stairs. And to me, these are probably, earlier technology that were likely used and developed. All the way up into using computers and cars. And of course, something like a toaster is more of an advanced technology. So we'll go to the next slide. Another example, these are a few more pictures of technology. Things I like to think of that not everyone might consider technology. Something as simple as writing a note and posting it. So that's altering the environment. So posting some information up on the wall. Similar to having these signs on the bathroom door, that's a technology. So that's altering the environment in order to indicate that there's something going on, something different about what's behind those doors. Using a calendar is technology. So following the days of the week and identifying what day is important. That's a form of technology. Then we have, of course, some more technology. And this is a slide I really like because we're kind of diving more into that caregiving. So there might be some images on the screen that surprise people and they, may not have thought of a brief, let's say, an incontinence brief as technology. Or let's say a bed rail may or may not have been considered technology, but it's certainly a way of altering the environment in order to support someone to get the best returns, as Ron said, out of life and to make life a bit easier for someone, especially for a caregiver. So we'll go to the next slide. So of course, integrating technology into caregiving comes with some factors and influences on choice and use. And I like to put that out there, that what works for someone, so what works for, you know, several of these participants today might not work for another handful of participants. And here's a list of potential reasons why. Of course, cost there, that always seems to be a main factor with technology. And as we go through the higher tech options today, you'll see that the prices of things do tend to go up based on what they're able to do for someone. Access to Wi-Fi. So even someone's location, there are still many areas that do not have Wi-Fi capability. So of course, that's really going to limit someone's choice and use. The use of smartphones, but also landlines. So there are some technologies I'm talking about today that require a landline phone. And when I think about many people around me, there are several households that don't have a landline phone anymore. Of course, exposure and awareness to technology will influence choice. General need. So if there's no care goal around that, then why would you need that technology? And of course, incidents. So having high risk or frequent incidents will help caregivers or might influence their choice because things are changing and happening a bit more. So, you know, what happened a month ago, things might be very different this month. So it might change what they're considering using. So there are, I know, many ways of classifying technology, and one way that I'll kind of be using today is looking at low versus high technology. So examples of lower technology in general would be the use of signs or labels. Something I really enjoyed seeing in some people's homes was covering a light switch. So if your loved one tends to turn on and off lights, forgets to turn on the light, maybe they can't find the light, simply putting a piece of tape over the light switch is a form of using technology. So you're altering the environment in order to make it safer. It's extremely low tech. It's something you don't need to do too often once it's done. Of course, using things like motion censored or night lights is a form of technology. As we were talking about, incontinence pads, safety equipment, and then alerting neighbors of risk could be considered a form of technology that's a little less challenging, I guess, to use. High tech, we're going right into things like smart home cameras or smart home assistants. We'll be talking a bit about GPS locating devices. I really like this. We're not diving into medication today, but of course, automated medication dispensers are things that are coming more available, and that would be considered a bit more high tech as opposed to, let's say, using a blister pack. Digital alarms or calendars, and of course, having an emergency response button. So those are a little bit more high tech. They tend to come with a bit higher cost. And this, again, is just a way of looking at technology based on low or high tech. And before we get into more of the actual goals of care we'll be addressing, I just wanted to go over this slide. These are how I help clients, help families identify what technology might be helpful. So apart from those other influencing factors that we already talked about, location, access, cost, we have to look at the goals. So I use a goals focused approach and considering things like the highest risk concerns that a caregiver might have. So we'll look at those things and really focus in on a few, maybe even one high risk behavior or challenge that might need some intervention. And I look at who will benefit the most. So sometimes it's not necessarily the client who directly benefits, but it's the caregiver. So something might make it a little bit easier for the caregiver to perform their caregiving duty or feel safer. And of course, this will indirectly benefit the client. And as I put here, what benefits the caregiver will certainly help everyone in return. And of course, something else that I like to think about is there an option of trialing the technology or not? Because people are, fairly apprehensive of spending money and time learning about technology if it really isn't going to work for them. So I like to consider that as well when I'm implementing this. And I think there's one more piece there, and perfect. So I also, it's just on that slide. There we go. Yeah, perfect. So I like to say the best technology is the one that will be used. And I'm sure that Ron can relate to this too, that, you know, you can present all kinds of technologies, but if it sits on the shelf, if it's not being used, then it really wasn't worth.
And one of the challenges with this was that a lot of families do not process how to test them out. That is a challenge. And one way to test it out, I tell people, is look at the return policy. Okay, technology has to be tested. Okay, you need to try it. You need to experience it. You know, and sometimes it's going to work, and sometimes it's not going to work. But do know, you know, when the return date is. Many times it's more than 2 weeks. It's a month. Try it out, and then if you're saying, okay, it doesn't work, okay, then return it. But if it works, then maybe you keep it. But that's kind of important, that it needs to be used. It needs to be tested out. And many people stop right there because they're afraid that they're going to make a mistake. But hey, there's return policies. So go out and try them if you can, or borrow it from someone else that has it and then try it out, right? So I do know that there's some, you know, societies out there, some services. I know, for example, in Ottawa, the Dementia Society of Ottawa, they might even be here today. They're giving a program where you get to sample technology. I think they're developing that there. So being led by some OTs as well, I think, Jenny. So, but yeah, technology is the best one, is the one that will be used. Okay. Oh, Jenny, still on mute.
There we go. Perfect. So we're going to look now at some caregiving needs and challenges that may benefit from technology. And I put together, whoever is doing the slide, we can click again on the slide. I put together a few examples and of areas of caregiving that might benefit from technology. Of course, these are 9 general examples, things like wayfinding in the home, calling for help, transfers in and out of bed. These are pretty common caregiving tasks, and they might resonate with some of our participants today as areas that they might be having a bit more challenge with. So again, looking at that goals-focused approach, these are areas that I tend to focus on with clients in caregiving and technology. I put the slide up there to show you that there are many. This is, you know, 9 of, who knows, an infinite number of potential caregiving areas that have challenges. And because of, you know, time and considerations for that, well, I'm actually only focusing on about 5 areas tonight, but this is, again, just an example of there's 9 here. There's infinite number of other potential areas that could benefit from technology. And so these are the 5 areas tonight that I will focus a little bit more specifically on. Something like repeated questions or asking for help. So this can be, you know, quite challenging for a caregiver to work through, support a loved one with. Another one is walking in the community and becoming lost. Of course, a very high risk challenge. Leaving the home and requiring increased monitoring for in-home safety. And I think of this one as someone who's leaving the home and not telling someone, and might otherwise not be safe to leave unless they notify someone. So of course, there are clients who are absolutely able to leave and go for a walk, but there's also ones that might be a lot more at risk if they're leaving. So the idea with that point is to make sure those clients are at least alerting a caregiver, or there's a way to tell them that, you know, your loved one's at the front door and might be leaving. Another area we're going to look at is falls prevention and identifying when a fall has happened. And then, of course, locating and wayfinding. And I do want to say that you'll notice tonight that as we move along the different challenges, that we might be actually addressing different challenges with the same technology. So there are certain technologies out there that, if applied a slightly different way, can actually be used for several of these caregiving challenges, which is kind of neat. So we'll dive right into the first one here. So repeated questions and asking for help. Starting at more of a low tech option and moving up to the higher tech options. Of course, writing out reminders in common spaces. So maybe writing out the answers to the questions if the client's able to read might be helpful. Let's say they're asking about appointments. You might want to redirect them to the calendar using that written reminder. Scheduling regular phone calls. So having, let's say, a daughter, a good friend call the person who's asking the repeated questions and answering them for them. So basically aiding the caregiver in kind of breaking up the task and having a team of people support the person who's asking questions. And that would be a form of using technology by informing others that you need a bit of help and having those regular phone calls. Two other things that might be helpful would either be video or voice recordings. So if it is really specific questions your loved one's asking, or they tend to still be asking about the same general theme, it might not be a bad idea to do a voice or video recording and simply pressing play on it and having it run through the answer for your loved one, as opposed to actually doing it in real time. And then, of course, using our highest tech options, such as a Google Nest or an Alexa or some kind of smart home option, to ask the questions of that device in order for it to help the caregiver. So we'll move on to the next. What I have done here is I removed the written reminders and scheduling of regular phone calls, because I feel like those are fairly self-explanatory, but I wanted to bring up the options of a voice recording or video recordings. So I have a few pictures here, just of course to kind of make the presentation a little bit more, interesting, but also understand the differences in the types of technology out there. So up on the left-hand corner there is actually a handheld recording device, very similar to some of the older recording devices that you press a button, it records, you press stop, and then you can play it. And there are different options, of course, if you want to have multiple different recordings kept in there. The middle picture here is something we're probably a little bit more familiar with, is using a smartphone or a tablet to play videos for your loved ones. So this is a great option of doing a voice or video recording in advance and then having that option to play for them throughout the day, or when they're stuck on asking a repeated topic, you might find it helpful to play the video back for them. And the other pictures here are a little bit a simpler technology in the sense that they offer usually more of like a 30-second or up to a minute recording, but there's only one option. So it's usually someone saying, hello, it's very nice to see you today. Or another option would be, with that red button, is having multiple ones in the home. And being able to press that button with pre-recordings of what that person might want to have the answer to, or what they might want to be doing in the room. And I really like the idea of the teddy bear. There's multiple stuffed animals out there where you can do a pre-recording. You put the little recording pack inside of them, and then the loved one that you have, your family member, friend, can push the button and it says the recording, and of course it's in someone else's voice. So I can think of an example of someone who's repeatedly asking for their daughter or repeatedly asking for their wife. I've seen it work fairly well with some people who have done a voice recording. Their wife or their daughter does the voice recording and they reassure them that they're doing quite well. They say, hello, Dad, we're having a great day. This is really nice that you wanted to talk to me. I'll be by later. So leaving a reassuring, supportive message I've seen this done, and it can be effective. Of course, like all this technology, it's trial and error. So we could move on to the next slide. So again, repeated questions and asking for help, looking at using the in-home recording and smart home technologies that are out there. So those who might have these in their home, they usually have to make a request of the recording, such as saying, you know, hey, Alexa, can you tell me more about this? And it might be more challenging depending on what level someone is at with their dementia to know how to use the technology. It might even be more appropriate for, let's say, a caregiver to use the technology to kind of fill in those questions for their loved one. So you might call on the in-home technology to answer questions about the weather, about, you know, talking a little bit more about a specific topic that your loved one is talking about a lot or perseverating on. Let's say it's, you know, past sailboats of certain variety. You can really ask these in-home systems all kinds of questions, and they tend to get used to the same questions over and over. They get smart themselves, and they tend to be able to pull up this information a little bit more readily as they're used. And Ron, I don't know if you want to add anything additional right here.
I actually would love to do a demo as you're talking, just because
Absolutely.
I realize many people, we talk about it, but some of them haven't even seen it.
Yeah.
So here's an example. So this would be like a Google Home, okay, device. I also have an Alexa. So I actually have all the different examples out there. So that's an Alexa, but I'm going to use Google here today. And this is a good high return, okay? But there's also something that we might be talking about more later, is like the concerns of technology, because some people are fearful that they don't trust it, all that. But put that aside for now. Okay, so I could say, hey, Google, what is the temperature tomorrow?
Tomorrow in Scarborough, expect a high of 24 and a low of 16.
Okay, you know, I could say, hey, Google, when's the next Toronto Blue Jays game?
The Blue Jays will play the Pirates on Friday at 6:35 p.m.
Okay, so it could be those things. And sometimes instead of me responding, I would actually, you know, ask the question of one of these smart devices. So again, a key point that you made there, Jenny, as well, is to kind of know where people are at with their dementia. Okay, not all technologies will be the same for a person who's very early in their dementia or someone who's much later on. So be aware that sometimes that technology will be outgrown, or you won't need it in the future. So you do all these calculations, because I've seen people get GPS devices and then they realize, okay, actually, we don't want one, okay, that has a button on it, because my dad, when he was further along, he didn't know what the button was for. It's an emergency button, and I kept getting emergency alerts. So I had to get one that had no button on it, right? So that's just an example of understanding technology. But coming back to this with questions, yes, there's Alexas, there's Google, and then those with an Apple will use Siri as well. You know, you would say the same questions as Siri. So sometimes you get fun things that you could ask. You could say, Alexa, or sorry, let's go. Hey, Google, tell me a story. You do something like that.
Sure. Here's the Firefly Princess from Storynory on Google Play Books.
Okay. Hey, Google, stop. Okay, so it's not going to tell me the story, but that could be a time saver, okay, where a caregiver might need some respite. Okay, so you could ask these devices to help you in some way. Okay?
It is so beautiful.
So, hey, Google, stop.
That ladies go out.
Okay, I'll turn that out there another way.
And cats.
Oh, okay. So anyways, that's just an example there for some people to see how it works.
That's
Oh,
fantastic.
so I'm smiling that Karen's Google kicked in as well. That's what happens when you do a presentation and you're talking to smart devices. People sometimes hear the smart devices popping up.
Yeah.
And turn them on.
Yeah, fantastic. So we'll move on to the next area of caregiving that can pose some concerns, and that's walking in the community and becoming lost. Again, moving from more of a lower technology up into the higher tech options. One of the main ones that I work with caregivers on is creating a community safety plan. And I do have a slide on this, so I'll go into that more in depth in a second. Of course, having a option out there is the Medical Alert Connect Protect program. And I do have a slide on that as well. So I look forward to talking about that. And then, of course, using smartphones, locating apps to help someone if they are becoming lost, and sharing location, as well as other smart devices such as a GPS enabled watch or devices. So we'll move into the option of looking at a community safety plan. And this is as straightforward and can be as simple as telling neighbors, telling frequently visited stores or the bank, let's say, a little bit more about your loved one. Of course, disclosing information about them is entirely your choice. And there's things that, you know, might be helpful for the community to know. There's, of course, things that they don't necessarily need to know. But something that's really important to remember is that a lot of people out there are willing to help, and a lot of businesses I've seen kind of go out of their way if they know that someone might be out, let's say, frequenting, you know, the local coffee shop. And there is a potential of them becoming disoriented, or maybe a little bit more concerned, or the staff is concerned about their well-being. So considering going into the store, letting them know a little bit about your loved one, and offering them a contact number, so that if they are concerned about the well-being of this person, they can always give you a call or give someone a call for the safety. And I have seen some stores even have a picture of that person up, you know, in a staff room or away from the common public, and have their name on it, and just say, if you're concerned about this person, please call, you know, their wife or their daughter at this number. So having those transfers of information and knowledge about your loved one is very helpful. And I do have in the handouts, there was a Finding Your Way identification form, and there is, and I know that's part of the resources that were sent out. It's a 5-page, basically a profile that you fill out for your loved one, and it's filled out in advance because, of course, if you know your dad or your husband goes missing, the last thing you're probably going to think about is trying to fill out a 5-page identification form about their, you know, height, eye color, those types of things. So having this done in advance, if there is a risk of them becoming lost in the community, is very helpful to have. So those resources are available to you. And I know I just saw it put in the chat as well. So thanks for doing that.
Jenny, if I can just add to this, this is kind of a personal thing for me, that this was one of the first challenges that my family had to go through around year 5 of my dad's dementia. And it was one that I didn't realize that after 4 or 5 events where he came home late, I didn't realize that this would get worse. So I always warn families, anytime you see any signs of possible, missing, someone going missing, or someone that keeps saying, I need to go somewhere, and it's the middle of the night, or they don't know that it's snowing outside. That's a sign to me that I would say, take that seriously. I actually do so much work in this space with first responders, with many societies, around the world on this topic. And it scares me because the stats are 60%, okay, of people living with dementia will have a missing incident somewhere. Okay, that's a flip of a coin. Okay, so half the people who might be here who's connected to someone with dementia, you're going to have an incident where someone's going to go missing. That could be missing just in the apartment, or outside of the house, or worse, deep into the community. And this is why I want to throw out what, Jenny, you're, pointing out to here. And I do a lot of work with the Finding Your Way team. It's about being proactive. Okay, so that's what happens a lot, that caregivers, and care partners, we are reactive because we've never experienced it. But everything that has happened in dealing with dementia has happened. There's other people that have gone through it. Okay, Jenny gets to see this all the time. Okay, so she has experience. I have experience. Talking to others that have lived it, okay, they will tell you, okay, you got to be prepared. Okay, because the worst case, and I'm not trying to scare people, but sometimes I have to do that strategy, is to say, I know families that their loved one has been missing for days, okay, and then they would find them. Their loved ones have actually passed away, on the first incident because they left the house, okay, and no one knew what they were wearing, and people walked by them, and they weren't prepared, okay, and worse, some of them are still missing, okay, they've never been found. So being prepared as best as possible is a big deal, and being proactive is what you need to do, and technology can help. I'm just going to sneak in one more here, Jenny. I keep saying take photos. Okay, if you have your phone, take photos of all the clothes that my dad wears as well. Okay, we've narrowed it down to 6 shirts back then, so we knew he had a blue, a yellow, a red, a green, and then when we would say, okay, we're missing the green shirt today, this is what it looks like. Okay, so that's where you could use technology as well. If you don't want to remember everything, take photos with your phone. Okay.
Yeah, fantastic, Ron. Thank you for that. So this is another program that some might be familiar with, some might not, about helping when someone is lost. And it's called the Medic Alert Connect Protect, and it is a partnership between the Medic Alert company, and this might be familiar to a lot of people, of course, with other medical or health issues, that there are bracelets that are available out there. And the way that this program works is trying to identify as quickly as possible someone who might be out in the community, and if they are missing or lost. And I like to say that time is of the essence for this one, which does relate nicely to that comment there at the bottom of the slide by Constable Kim Walker. So the first 24 hours in the search of a missing person is absolutely critical. And so this program has helped folks reunite with their family quicker. And the way it works is having a variety of options there for wearing a Medic Alert bracelet. Of course, there's ones that look very much like your typical, I think they call them dog tag type decals bracelets. There's absolutely beautiful watches, necklaces, bracelets, watches out there. And it's associated with a subscriber identification number. So when the person enrolls in the program, they're given a number, and that's what's etched on. I think sometimes it actually does say dementia as well, but more important is having that identification number. So if that person's out and about, they have the identification number. It makes it more readily available for emergency responders, healthcare providers to pull up their vital medical information, and also who their emergency contacts are. So if someone has one of these bracelets on and they have left and are potentially missing, it does give another great option of, if they are out there, of course, as long as they're wearing the device, it gives another piece of identification that allows the police to pull up their profile. And there are, I've looked it up, every time I look up the Medic Alert Connect Protect program, there's always more and more police services, and this is now across Canada, that are connected with it. So they're able to pull up a profile on this person depending on the identification number on the bracelet. And just for the cost of that, there is an initial $75 registration fee. And then if you go month to month, it's about $7 per month, or you can pay for 1 or 2 full years at about $80 a year. So that's about the cost of having that regularly available and kind of having that updated. So
Jenny, just one
Medic
small
Alert.
point for
Yeah.
Medic Alert. They also actually have a color version for people with dementia, which is blue. So if you ever see someone with a Medic Alert that has blue, a fair bit of blue on it, chances are they acknowledge that they have dementia. So that is just something to distinguish, but it should also say on there anyways. But yeah, if you see blue on a Medic Alert bracelet, chances are they have dementia.
Yeah, fantastic. So moving on to a few more smart options. These are all very similar in the sense of offering a smartphone to basically share location. And of course, this requires a few very key important things, is that the app is downloaded on the phone, the app is working, and then of course, the person who's out in the community has the phone on them. So it can be more challenging if someone, let's say, wasn't used to carrying a phone or doesn't have a phone on them. But if all of those key pieces are in place, then this is also a great option, because these technologies allow you to share your location with a number of other people that have the same app. And these are just a few examples. There's Glimpse there, there's the iSharing through the Apple products, and then there's the Life 360, and most of these apps are free. I know Life 360 is not, but it has a few other additional features. And again, it uses the satellite GPS signals in order to share in real time where that person is. So if someone else has access to their location, then they can open up the app and, see where dad is when he's out and about in the community. And then a few additional things that the Life 360 has, things that might not necessarily need to be used, are things like it can generally detect if a vehicle collision has happened. It can offer medical assistance in the moment if the person knows how to go into that option. And it can cost anywhere, as the Life 360, from about $6 to $30 a month, depending on what features, and generally allows at least 5, if not up to an unknown, a large number of contacts for that person to share their location with. And I'm just wondering, I think Ron had an additional app that he was mentioning.
Yeah, well, I mentioned the WeTrack app earlier. That was one. For me, it's whatever works. Some, again, are free, but when I say free, technically it's free because maybe you're paying for a phone plan already. So there's a cost of the phone. Okay. This is a good example now where it's kind of shifting, that many people right now already have a smartphone. Okay. And if you're not aware, that is a GPS device as well. Okay. So some people, again, you got to remember, I was doing this back in 2000 or 2010. Okay. Smartphones weren't as advanced. So I was buying physical devices, which you can still do. Okay. For some people, there's numerous out there. It's not the easiest thing to navigate sometimes. Okay. But there is, some that, Jenny, you've listed, or you're going to be listing here. But one thing to consider is, how does it work for you? Okay. It's not just when my dad is missing and then I go on the phone and I say, okay, where is dad right now? Okay. That's one feature, but many of these features can actually send you alerts. Okay, so there could be a fence. So here's the example of how I would do it, is that at my dad's home, okay, there's a virtual fence that if he leaves that area, I get an alert. Okay, so I said, okay, he's left the area. I actually want my dad at, depending where he was at, not the later stages, but I want him to still go out. Okay, but I just want to make sure that he's out there safely. So I said, okay, he's out. But I also want to get an alert when he gets to the coffee shop, or when he makes it to the church, or when he makes it to the variety store to buy his lotto ticket, right? I want those alerts along the way, okay? So it's not just when they've left, but it's when they've arrived as well. So I said, okay, I know where he goes. And in the back of my mind, if I don't get a second alert that he's arrived somewhere within 15 minutes, okay, he's not in the places where he should be going or where he usually goes, okay? That's something that you may want to consider with some of these devices as well, okay? But many will be using smartphones now. Some are going to be using also smartwatch, okay? So you could also use a watch. And that's kind of the tricky part is, for many is, well, which one do I get? Do I get one that's hanging, right? That could be hanging on them, where they could take it off. Is it a watch where they have to take it off and all that? But that's just a few examples of how we use these technologies, is to get those alerts to kind of know where they are, if they're safe, or when they've arrived somewhere safely. So that's something also for the caregiver, also when they're coming back. Okay. There were times where my dad was at his day program and they would drive him back. Well, I might be somewhere and I said, oh, geez, I just got an alert that he left his day program. I have 15 minutes to get back home to make sure I'm there when they arrive. Okay, so that's another way to use it, that you're not always paying attention, but you will get those alerts to remind you to say, okay, I know where things are at. I know where I need to be. I don't need to be constantly looking at the clock, okay, which many of you do. I'm sure you do, and I get that. So this is where technology can reduce that stress a little bit better. Or you could have more than one. So Jenny, I forgot about this one. You could have more than one person caregiving.
Mhm.
I had my cousin who doesn't live anywhere close to my dad, but I said, I'm transferring it over to you. Can you kind of just make sure if today you're not getting the alerts, okay, the way they should be? He should be at this place at 12 noon, and at 4 o'clock he should be back home. Okay. Well, I could go do my own thing, and I have another caregiver, care partner supporting me along the way. Okay, so that's the beauty of some of these tools out there that you could kind of be creative with.
Mhm. Perfect. Thanks so much. And that brings us nicely into the next slide, is moving away from specific smartphones into just a few other options for the GPS. And you did mention the smart watches. So there we can see the Apple Watch, and works very similarly. It has, there's a certain series of them. I think I have it written down here exactly which ones, but there's a certain series, and they do the live tracking. So you can connect them to a phone. You don't necessarily need to have a phone on you because they offer the live GPS tracking, but you have them paired to those caregiving or care partners. So if the person is out walking and they have it enabled, then you have real-time reports of where they are. The same with the next two pictures over there. Are the two in the middle are Garmin based technology, and it's a fairly advanced, well-known company for the navigation options. That first picture is a handheld device that is quite expensive. I mean, that one you're probably looking at least $500-600 for something that's that high technology. It works very similar or the same, I guess you could say, as a smartphone or a watch. But the range on it is quite significant. Hopefully the person out walking wouldn't be, going into the heavy bush on a hike, but this technology would allow for that. The same with that Garmin watch. So it can give you a map, and it can also highlight where the person has been. So, let's say another option for this is if you're not sure, you haven't exactly been tracking, or, you're able to relax and not keep an eye on where they've been, you can always look back and see kind of the map of where your loved one may have walked for that day, and will give you a better idea of where they're going. And then the last option we have on this slide is one of the ones that Ron had available there and had used with his dad. And it's the availability of using a device that has to be paired. So it can give out live GPS signals. It's more of a short range device, these ones. So they're tiles. Typically people might see them or use them for things like lost keys. Or they might put them, let's say, on their glasses or in a case for their glasses because they're not sure where they are. But they're also another nice option if your loved one tends to walk around, let's say, their neighborhood or within, I think it's usually 200-300 meter range of the cell phone that it's connected to. And you can get updates of where they are without having to, force them to wear a watch or take a smartphone with them. Something like the tile can be put right in their wallet, put in their pocket. I've seen people maybe tie them even to their laces on their shoes, lower down. And so it's kind of more more discreet, but it's still with them sending off those GPS signals. And I think Ron might have another.
So the tile looks like this. Okay, there's different versions, right? And you just go to your app. Okay, and you have to be within a specific radius. So this is not like around the world. Okay, and sometimes you do want the tile for other things. Maybe it's not locating dad. It's actually locating the TV remote. Okay, a lot of people saying, where the heck is the TV remote? Okay, this doesn't even have to be for my dad. This could be just for me, right? So it's pretty much like a key finder. Okay, you stick it on somewhere. There's smaller versions of this, and then you would go to the app. I would always put one in a wallet. Okay, that's one I'd put in a wallet. They have a flat version. So the tile is one example. Okay, there is the Apple. Someone I think typed it in the chat earlier, but there's also the Apple. Okay, so there's different versions out there, but we're not going to go into the detail of which one to use. But these are Bluetooth devices that are, depending on your price point, could be relatively a high return. for these. You know, if you were to buy maybe 4 of them, you might be able to get it for $100. Okay, but that could last for years. Okay, you could reuse them. You could just change the battery and then give it to someone else and resell some of this technology, so you get your return back in the future. But it's something worth testing out, the tiles, or the Apple version, which I'm forgetting what it's called.
Yeah. And Ron, I was just happened to notice at the same time, someone said, what is the radius? So do you happen to know with some of those? I know they're a bit different, and it also depends on battery too.
Yeah, I would say I thought it was about maybe 200 meters the most, but here's the best way I'm going to look at it. It also matters how many walls are in the room. Okay, it depends how thick the walls are and all that. I would say that this is ideally used, you know, in combination. Okay, so we would have a GPS device with my dad. Okay, we actually had 2 GPS. I believe in backups. We were able to afford 2 GPS that we had for my dad. Plus, we would have back then a tile when it just came out. Okay, and why would I have that? Because GPS is great. It might give you the area that they're in, but my dad lived in a building. There were times he was on different floors. So when I'm looking at this, I actually don't even know where he's exactly at. I might be on the 2nd floor, but he's actually walking on the 8th floor. So I would go back and forth and I'd be looking at the tile, okay, until it makes a connection. Okay. And then I realized, oh, there it is, it's on, then it's off. And then I'd go to the next floor, then I'd check for the next floor. I didn't realize my dad was just riding the elevators up and down. So he was actually, you know, having fun on the elevator, and I kept trying, I didn't look in the elevator, I just kept going on every floor. But so I would just say that think of a building, you know, a residential building, and probably the distance from one hallway to the other hallway, okay, is really what it is for the most part. There is another feature, we won't go into that detail today in detail, but it's, you could say it's lost, it's missing, okay? And what happens is the group, okay, so this is a community search, that if I say this tile is missing, okay, then if anyone else comes close to that with their phone and they have the tile app, it will send me an alert to say, oh, this is at near the coffee shop, okay? And then it's not GPS, it's kind of crowd sourcing, okay, where the location is. I might get too technical here, so that's why I don't want to go there, but you could say that it's missing, and then the community might be able to pinpoint and say, okay, it's near this area, it's near this area. Okay, so I do believe and support this technology as well. Okay? And you don't pay for this monthly, right, Jenny? I don't know if you mentioned that there, but it's a one-time cost.
No, I didn't, but that's a really great
right?
point.
Whereas the GPS, chances are you're paying for it ongoing. It's a monthly service. So I combine that, GPS plus this. Okay, if one of them doesn't work, you have at least a backup plan that might give you a higher chance of success. Okay?
Perfect. So we're going to move into another caregiving area that we can integrate technology. And that includes leaving the home. So the actual act of leaving the home and maybe requiring a bit more monitoring for improved safety. So moving into certain areas of the home, of course, can be influenced by having strategic lighting through the home. And I'll talk about this a bit more. Also looking at using alternative secure exits. So if you're finding your loved one always use the front door, consider starting to use maybe a different exit in the home if you're hoping that they're not going to be leaving. Again, another thing I'll talk about. Using signs and symbols to help redirect or deter them from going to certain areas. And also, of course, integrating things like alarms or door locking systems that are in addition to those that might already be in place. And then, of course, using maybe in-home monitoring and cameras. So some of those smart home technologies. So looking specifically at using strategic lighting, alternative exits and signs and symbols. So I'm just kind of incorporating these all into one slide. Just a few key points about this is typically if areas are lit up, let's say a light is left on in the kitchen when someone goes to bed at night, it's much more likely that if they get up, let's say use the washroom, they're going to tend to move towards areas that are lit up. It's just kind of part of what we've noticed with our, especially with my work with people. And also if you think about being up at night, if there's a dark area, you're not too sure about it, it doesn't seem of interest, you're much less likely to go towards that area. So knowing this, caregivers can use Strategic lighting. So let's say keeping the front door dark, making sure that your porch lights are turned off, your back door light on the deck, let's say, is turned off. Or any lights that are around the exits are likely, if they're turned off, it's less likely that your loved one is going to walk towards that area. And especially at night, maybe just keeping a light on in the bathroom and the hallway, and that's about it. Another thing I think it's important to mention is just the simple use of using signs. So putting up a caution sign, a danger sign. I do find this tends to work a little bit better with individuals that are more progressed with their dementia, more of a moderate to advanced stage. Because of course these signs indicate to us, you know, safety, and there's a concern that if I go there, I'm going to be in danger. So using these signs strategically to keep someone away from the front door, maybe put it on the back of the front door so they're less likely to try opening it when they're unsupervised or not supposed to be leaving, is a good option. And then I also wrote using alternative exits, and it's not always feasible. There are many homes that only have one main way in and one out. And I think of, you know, condo buildings, let's say apartment buildings, there is one main exit. So it might not work quite as well. But if you can use certain ways to maybe distract the person from going to that door, or start using another door if it's available, such as one that goes into the garage. It might give you a little bit more time to get to that person if they're leaving, as opposed to using the front door. So on the next slide, I'll show you some other ways you can help understand a little bit more about maybe where your loved one is in the home, and you can increase the monitoring. So using alarms is a great way of doing that. There are a number of different types of alarms. There's motion censored ones. So when the person intersects with a basically a electronic line or a beam of light that is projected from the alarm, an alarm will sound saying that, you know, something has moved in front of this, and you should be alerted. There's also the one there, the bottom photo of that woman getting out of bed. What's happening there is she's actually stepping onto a pressure mat alarm. So it is alerted, it is censored as soon as there's some pressure put on that mat. And so maybe, you know, her daughter in the next room is now aware that mom's getting up out of bed. So these alarms, the pressure ones, the motion censored ones, I often see them installed on bed frames, door frames, let's say close to an exit. So if you want to know mom's walking towards the front door, it might be a little bit too late to install it on the front door. You might want to put it in the hallway leading to the front door or near the front closet. Similar to the mat, depending on how quickly your loved one might move. Again, this is where Ron talks about using technology at different stages. You might find that over time, you might want to move the location of these alarms depending on how quickly that person moves or where they tend to walk towards. The mats tend to be about $50 all the way up to $300 plus, same as the motion censored alarms. So they come in a variety of different brands and sizes. And of course, you kind of pay for what you get, I think, in a sense. So ones that are made to last longer, have a little bit better lifespan, tend to be a bit more expensive. There's also the option there. I have two other pictures. One is an additional door locking system. So the one up top is just installed on a regular door, and it's just an extra lock that can be placed, let's say at night, that requires a different way of opening it. It's actually very simple. It unclips from the top and then swings open. And it's nice because they come in different colors, so you can actually make it blend right in with the door. Another option would be a smart lock system. So this is an example of one where the lock is actually controlled, let's say through a smartphone or another device in the house. And the door can, you know, might be tried to be unlocked, but it might not be able to, depending on the type of smart lock system. Or let's say the door is being unlocked, there can be a sensor sent to someone's cell phone indicating that that's happening, and they can actually automatically relock the door if done so in enough time so that the person doesn't leave. or at least then they know they're alerted to the door being unlocked. So again, these are just a small variety of the many that are out there, just to get some ideas of alarms and door locking systems. The smart locks, I was looking, I was very surprised. The prices can range from $100 up to $500 plus, depending on what types of door locking systems there are. But of course, this is more so ones that, let's say, you can control the lock on the door all the way from work across town. So it really does offer quite a variety of available options. That smart lock that's on there up higher on the door, that's only about $35 or so to have one of those installed. So it just shows the difference in pricing and, high tech versus low tech options.
Jenny, if I can share here. So this is a very important topic that many caregivers go through, is the door. Okay. And I've always told families and even educators in the space to kind of say the door is quite critical. Okay. Because once you go outside of the door, then safety becomes a challenge. It can become risky. Okay. There have been people that have gone on the other side of the door and were found deceased the next day in the middle of the winter. Okay. They just left the door. So caregivers, many times, my family went through that. My mom would say, I'm always sitting at the chair near the door because I'm afraid that dad is going to leave. That's called the silent exit. Okay. And we want to reduce the silent exit. It's a very easy solution, just like this. Door chimes. Okay. That could be just so that my mom can go to sleep. Okay. In another room, and then she'll hear the door chime. Okay. You could get door chimes where the sensor is on the door, but the alarm is actually in my mom's bedroom. Right. So she could hear it quite easily. So the silent exit is something we got to be careful of. But then we could use the remote, door protectors out there so that my mom could go to sleep. But if the door were to be open, I would also get an alert, as Jenny was saying there. So there's a lot of that happening. So it is quite important, this, protection of the door, okay, or any exit. But the other thing that I also want to make sure is we also have to make sure we also make it safe for the person if we're not there. So be careful because some families would lock that person up in the house and they can't get out while they're out and about. Okay? That actually is a fire concern. That actually has happened in a few incidences that I know where a fire happened and the person with dementia just couldn't get out. Okay. And as much as you cared as best as you could, I'd rather them be able to get out. Okay. But we have to have other backups, okay, in the way. So if my dad were to leave the door, okay, I could use the basic technology of calling the neighbors and say, my mom's not there right now, but my dad left. Can you go see if you can get my dad? If my dad made it further out into the community, my backup was the GPS device. I would say, okay, he's walking to the variety store. The backup would be, so if he makes it to the variety store, okay, they have my business card. They know if my dad shouldn't be there when it's dark. Okay, they only know he should be there during the day. They'll call me and say, your dad's here, which has happened before. Now, Ron, do you want us to kind of keep him here and entertain him while you get him? I said, yeah. Okay. So I'm just throwing this out as well, is that when some of these systems don't work, or it does what it's supposed to do, but it doesn't fully keep my dad in the house, what's your backup plan as well? Okay. But just simply putting a door chime has saved many lives. Okay. And one family, just Jenny, this is a very smart one. It's also when you're at home, but some people travel, right? And one caregiver, she was quite concerned, okay, that her husband would leave the hotel room, okay, with her not knowing. So she put the suitcase in front of the door with wheels and put the keys right on the edge of the suitcase. So if he moved the suitcase, the keys will drop and make a noise, okay? That's just her way. That's her low-tech creative solution to kind of say, okay, I heard the keys. Why are the keys making a noise? Okay. So, but let's use some technology. There is technology out there like this that you can take with you.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Great ideas. Yeah. And that's the neat thing, is that we can present these, but then there's, caregivers meeting caregivers and having those discussions. There's so many other low high-tech options that they might come across or have basically just invented in the spot when they've needed to. So just moving on is the last kind of, I guess, highest tech options for someone who might be leaving the home or needing increased monitoring. Kind of going back to some of those smart home systems, of course, but then there's also, I can think of a a client recently who they didn't have Wi-Fi in the home. It wasn't something that they've ever had. They've never used it. But there was a tendency for the person to go downstairs and kind of start fiddling with the electricity, the gas line, and they were very concerned about what they were doing down there. So, you know, a simple option would be getting a monitor that parents might use for their children and setting it up in a space that they're concerned about their loved one being. And this could also, you know, be at the front door, but it could be anywhere in the house that they might want to monitor someone. And, you know, just for looking at time's sake tonight, I mean, there are so many different options for in-home cameras. I couldn't believe when I was doing the research what there is out there. And there's, you know, I've seen it's as simple as setting up one camera with sensors, one camera, let's say, and one main kind of station module that can, you know, interact with them or talk to them and send the camera. And there's as high-tech options as having sensors on the doors and windows and cameras in every room. So it can, you know, be as interactive and as, you know, wired as it can be, or you might just find it helpful to have a camera in one specific area, depending on where your loved one might go to. So again, these are just some ideas of setting up some cameras in the home. They can be connected to phones and sending a signal in real time, or having a simple monitor that you carry around with you at the same time as your loved one, let's say, is downstairs, potentially interfering, you know, with with something down there, and you want to see what they're up to. So falls prevention and identifying when someone might need some help. Of course, you know, going back to those lowest tech options, the things that occupational therapy I find is kind of based on is, of course, clear and well lit pathways, making sure if the person needs mobility aids or equipment that there's an assessment made for that. A good pair of footwear and non-slip surfaces are available. And then there's some fall alert motion detection buttons and smart watches out there. And again, using some of those smart home systems to help if there is a fall, and identifying how they might support the family. So first, going into, you know, the clear, well-lit pathways and having non-slip surfaces and having a good pair of footwear. I just want to highlight a few things on this slide. It's so important, especially in the bathroom, I find, to have a lot of contrast. So having clear, well-lit pathways, but as well as having the person with dementia be able to tell the difference between, you know, the side of the tub or where the toilet starts versus the floor. And as you may be aware of, most bathrooms are white on white on white, and it's so very difficult to distinguish the tub from the toilet, from the floor, from the sink. So having equipment set up that might contrast with the color of the floor. This the third picture in here is a great example of how the floor, not many floors are dark like this, but because the floor is dark, they actually put a mat around the toilet to almost put a frame around it to identify that it's a different color. And they also used a different color toilet seat to help identify where the door is, or sorry, where the toilet seat is, so they know where that is in the relation to the rest of the bathroom. Another important thing I wanted to highlight was the non-slip shoes, a good rubber sole. An interesting fact I've learned over the years is that as we age, the fat pads and muscles in the bottom of our feet become very thin. And it eventually is it's the feeling of them. They basically are walking directly on the bones on the bottom of their feet. So that will naturally create a lot of pain, difficulty walking with balance, trying to be careful on their feet. And having a good pair of footwear that has a thicker sole, but also has a non-slip surface on the bottom is absolutely something that should be considered when someone is aging in the home, both for their comfort and safety. And that pair of slippers I often just put up there. I love them a lot because of the adjustability. You think about someone who might be wearing, let's say, a thick pair of wool socks in the winter. or might not be wearing any socks in the summer, and then someone that might have edema in their feet and legs. These are great for adjustability and offering them a good pair of footwear that they can wear in the house regardless of the time of year. And it looks like,
Just showing you, here's one
Yeah.
example here, right? So it has those features that
yeah,
you can easily slip in. It's a stretchable there, you know, kind of like that, right? So, yeah, there are adaptive clothing that is to make life easier, pretty much.
absolutely.
So,
Yeah, yeah, and I really like those ones, Ron, because instead of, looking like a slipper, they're a shoe, right? And
Yeah.
if someone's used to wearing a running shoe, and style is still very important to people, that looks a little more modern.
yeah, that's the trend, which, so I'm going to do a plug in for Silver. It's that they've realized fashion is a big deal as well. Okay, because that's it's not about a stigma that you're supposed to look this way. There's,
Yeah.
age with grace, age with, style, with finesse, whatever that may be. So,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and someone did just ask where the slippers were from. Those were a Silverts option as well, but those ones that you have are Silverts.
Yeah.
So the slippers I showed, as well as those shoes that Ron, it's a type of adaptive clothing. I think it's mostly online. I don't know if there's an in-store.
no, again, if you missed it earlier, I am affiliated with Silvert, so just declaring that right now.
Yeah.
It's just silverts.com. So silverts.com. And as I said, if you wanted a discount, just type in Ron 10. That'll get you an extra 10%. I kind of made an agreement with them. If I'm promoting their stuff, I want people to get a deal. So, but yeah, there's, that's Silverts.
Wonderful. So again, in this area, talking about falls prevention and identifying when help is needed. Many of you might know that there are falls alert or motion detection buttons. They might be called a personal alert system. They're called many different things. One of the handouts that I did provide McCormick with was the list that's available through London Middlesex. There's actually quite a number of places you can look at getting one of these buttons from. Just a few I'll highlight are, and I have up here the Connect Care one, and it's actually run through the local hospital here. And I learned that it's actually run through a network of trained volunteers, so that keeps the costs down. So when someone calls and needs assistance, the operator on the other end, for the most part, are trained volunteers to help triage where the call needs to go. There's also Lifeline. It's a very common one. It's a nationwide one. And I just learned as well that Lifeline has a Go Safe now. So it actually has a GPS built into it, so they can leave their home and still use the same technology, which is new. And just for those who don't know about these systems, it's a wearable button, typically a necklace, sometimes a bracelet, and they come in basically two different forms. From my understanding is they either require you to press the button if help is needed. Let's say there's a fall, an emergency, something's happening, or there's ones that actually detect motion. So I believe the one there that we can see that's actually put on by one of the telecommunication companies. A lot of those companies are getting into it as well. They detect when the person has gone from a vertical position to a horizontal, and it'll automatically call and see if they need help. Usually these systems need to be hooked up to a landline phone, so that can be a challenge. There is a monthly fee as well, but mostly it is sliding scale. So the prices do vary, but I do encourage people to look at that handout and call around to see what company might work the best for them. And then the next slide just looks at using some of the other technology that we've already talked about. So using a smartwatch or some of those GPS technology watches, they actually have a falls detection available on them. Not all smartwatches do, but some do. So if that's a feature you're hoping for someone, definitely ask if you're into one of the stores looking for these options. And of course, it has to not only have it on the phone or the watch, but it has to be enabled. So you have to make sure, I have a picture there. The first one is on the phone that's associated with the watch. The person has to go into the settings and enable the fall detection. And it can either always be on, so if there's a risk of the person falling at all times, or if it's only, let's say, you know, your loved one who goes out and runs. I've seen this with runners. They know if there's a fall that's happened during a run. So you can actually set it up so it only detects falls at certain times. Some of them call it falls detection. The Garmin products call it incident detection, but it works the same way and has to be paired with a smartphone. And the costs are the same costs as your typical phone bill costs. Usually these are, once you have your smartphone, it's included in with the features of the apps.
Kenny, just at one small point, I have a feeling people are not from Canada, so we just want to make sure the prices you have are Canadian.
Yes, they are.
Yes, I just want to make sure.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you.
realize
Yeah,
some
no,
of them
they're
are-
Canadian prices. And I'm giving you quite the range because it really does have a range of prices depending on what type of smartphone you're looking for. And then the last slide in this falls prevention, identifying when help is needed, would be the use of the smartphone or the smart home systems. So like Ron was able to ask his various smart home technologies to, you know, tell him the weather or when the next Blue Jays game was. You can also ask for help or yell help or instruct the systems to do something like call for 911 or to ask them, you know, to call a family member. And I'm not going to start saying it because I don't want everyone's smart home Google Alexa systems to start calling people. But if you say the name of the device and ask for it to call for help, then that's another great option. If there is a fall or if help is needed in the home, these systems can connect to a phone and call, which is pretty neat. And then just being mindful of time too. There's just one more area that I want to briefly cover, and that's locating and wayfinding. And this is more of helping folks remain independent as much as possible. So almost more of a prevention. So using signs, using the same daily routes, placing familiar items along the way, and also, again, using the same wearable GPS technology, but actually using it in a way that can support someone to know where they're going on their route. So briefly, a little bit about signs and wayfinding, focusing specifically on the use of signs itself, using very simple signs, maybe 1 to 5 words at the most, ensuring that language encapsulates the first language of that person or their language preferences. So even if at this point they or were speaking English, let's say, but their first language was actually Spanish, consider maybe having the signs in both English or Spanish, or just Spanish, depending on where they are with their dementia, would be a very important consideration. Also the location of the signs. So what might be eye level for me or Ron, or someone else here might not be the same eye level for each other, depending on our height, but also if we have a kyphotic posture. So if we do have more of a bump on our back and we tend to look down, of course, the signs should be placed lower down on the walls or on doors where we would actually have eye gaze. Or if the person's using a wheelchair, having the sign halfway down the door so they can actually see it and it's within their eye gaze. Another thing I just want to highlight before we move on to the next slide is I used a lot of yellow on the slide on purpose. And this is because it's actually the color for the most part that the human eye will attract to first. Another reason why a lot of people use yellow highlighters is it tends to be the color that if it's going to stand out, it's going to be yellow. So incorporating a bit of yellow onto the signs that you might hang up for your loved one. I like the picture here of the footprints on the ground showing that you can buy these or you can paint them on yourself. As long as the floor is not white or too light, having a yellow footprint along the ground would be probably one of the best color options to capture the person's attention. I like this slide. It's kind of, it speaks to different levels of dementia, but having familiar items along the way when someone is walking and trying to locate where they are in space is so important. Having an area that brings them some comfort, engagement, also offers them a nice place to rest. So, if there's a few pictures like this first one, a few pictures of family on the wall, but there's also a nice little seating area. It's much more likely that someone's going to walk towards and find some comfort and maybe even stay a while in that spot. Also having engagement pieces. This photo here on the right is a few different types of Montessori. They call them activities. So things that encourage sorting, matching, kind of more hands-on busy work. Having these options along the route or in corners of the house where you think someone might want to spend a bit of time and engaging. It's very helpful to have these along the way for someone. And what I wanted to do was just include just a few thoughts about, have you considered for your loved one what would capture their attention? Have you considered, what attracts your loved one, what brings them comfort, whether it's photos, whether it's memorabilia of certain sports teams? These are just important things to recognize now and to consider, especially when you're looking at wayfinding and feeling safe in a space. Because having these items available within view, displayed, is very important for this person's engagement. And of course, will more likely keep them active and willing to walk around the space that they have. And so what I included here actually is just a photo. And, for me, for example, if I was walking in a space and I see this, for some people, this might not mean much, but for me, this would bring feelings of adventure, calming. I might wonder, what national park was I in? So just considering for your loved one, are there certain pictures, displays? This is actually an example of a big poster you can order and put up on the wall. But yes, if there's certain pictures and memories that were important to that person, it's very important to consider displaying them along the route they might typically walk. And just a last slide for the locating and wayfinding. I did mention that the smartphones and smartwatches can help detect and suggest where the person is to their loved ones, but it can also be used proactively. So the watches and then those portable devices can actually, they have voice and can actually tell you where to go. And, we use this every day, right? When we're driving, we have our Google Maps or, iMaps or something going on in the car when we're not sure where we're going and it tells us to turn left, at Main Street. It can operate similarly if someone is trying to locate where to go, if they're out for a walk, or you can set up specific maps as well on these devices. So if you want your loved one to walk a certain, route around the neighborhood, you can pre-design some of this for them to actually follow the route and hopefully be a little bit more independent with their wayfinding. And I don't know, Ron, if you wanted to add anything additional to this one or not, but those are the main things I can think of.
Yeah, at this moment, there's a lot we've done around wayfinding and locating. The goal, I think, that Jenny, you have done greatly here is to kind of just plant a seed to those listening and watching in that there are so many tools out there to solve for this challenge. And you're not going to get it all in this session here, but you got to do some homework. You got to kind of know what you're looking for. But there are tools that I do want people to understand that if you ever get stuck, find someone who's gone through it, okay? And find 3 people that have gone through it. Find OTs that have gone through it. Okay? There are solutions. It's never going to be perfect, but it is something that there are better solutions than maybe what you might be doing at this moment. So that's more the general comment I wanted to say.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So this is just a recap of what we've talked about. Technology is a lot of things that you're likely doing in your everyday life to support your loved one. It's using ways to change and manipulate the environment to make it a little bit easier. There's various types of technology, and of course, the use and choice of technology is based on several factors. Again, the best technology is the one that will be used. And as Ron so helpfully taught us, is that what's used, at one point during the disease might not be useful at another point. So keeping that in mind, that it doesn't mean it's not a success, but if it worked even for a brief period of time to make caregiving a little bit easier, a little safer, then it was definitely worth the time and that was put into it.
Jenny, I'm going to throw one little tip here just on that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely.
A lot of caregivers always puts it on themselves to figure this all out. Okay. I've had people that want to support and care, and they said, you know what, can you do me a favor? Can you help me get the medicine machine for my dad? Okay, can you actually help, pay for that? Even though our family could have, they just said, no, we're going to help you pay for it. And we're going to get the family member or the friend. Many times it's the teenage kid that can figure this all out faster than even me. Okay. And they'll say, you know what, that's how we're going to support you. Okay. So I'm just challenging all the caregivers out there to not try and do this all by yourself. You have, McCormick Dementia Services, you have, dementia societies, Alzheimer's societies, different groups, but you have your community that asks them to say, can you help me bring in some technology? Okay, so that's what I'm going to throw out as well, is that I think is quite critical. Don't do this all yourself. Okay, it's Jenny, you know how hard it is just for you and me to keep up with this, right? So just that, caregiver doing that. Get your team, get your tech team around you.
Yeah, and also these wonderful hosts tonight with McCormick Services. I know even if in the moment they might not know, they can always, reach out to us or reach out to even a community occupational therapist or someone that can provide some assistance. So I know we've ran a little bit over time, but we are opening up. I believe it's the chat, and I see there's many things in the chat. I don't know if either.
I've been able to keep up with some of them there.
Amazing.
Yes, thank you. I first of all just want to thank you for a wonderful presentation and sharing your knowledge and experiences with us. Yes, we do have some time for some question and answer. We also on this slide here have some references that Jenny's put together. So if you are interested in those, they will be available as well through us at McCormick. So I'm going to stop sharing and then we'll open up the question and answers.
And as some people are putting maybe their questions here, I forgot, I just wanted to show, so the importance of lighting there, Jenny, that you talked about. I said mood lighting. Sometimes you can control it from a distance. So I could say, hey, Google, make globe lamp blue. Okay, so you can see the blue glow. I could say, make it pink. Again, this is not just for dementia challenges, but it did help my dad back in the day when I was able to control the intensity of his lighting from a distance. So that's controlling the environment, being able to play the music he wants. I could either raise the energy or lower the energy if I needed to. So that's some ways to do it. And that's also not for the person that we're caring for. That could also be for me. Sometimes I just want a room that is green, or whatever. So, yeah. So I see, I think one or two questions, or Lindsay.
I don't see any questions in the Q&A right now.
Oh, sorry, in the chat.
In the chat.
I see that it's more of a question from Carol. I would like to know which apps caregivers find useful. So that would be like me. So Carol, that's a challenging one because I kind of need to know what are you solving for, is what Jenny kind of said. What is the goal? And sometimes you want to work backwards. Okay. Of course, there's many apps like reminder apps. I think someone mentioned to us that they use reminder apps a fair bit. It really depends. I sometimes am hesitant with apps that try and solve everything because it could be overwhelming and confusing. Sometimes I just want the app that just sets an alarm. Okay. And I could do it, like it just reminds me of an alarm. There's medication apps. I don't know, Jenny, if there's any specific apps that you see that people keep asking for or what they're solving for, but yeah.
No, I think a lot of that I've seen for apps specifically are the locating apps. So just knowing how to share with a phone, as well as what you might want to download for like the tile apps if you're using a tile with someone. I haven't had too many people ask specifically about the apps. I think a lot of my caregivers so far have been using more of those lower to moderate, if you can say that, technology options. So I think we're at a point, with this technology, and I think that's probably why we have a lot of guests here, is we're kind of, finally using the technology that's available to us and considering it in caregiving. So I feel like we're so early days that there's not, one specific app, but again, looking at what is the goal, what have you already tried, and what do you currently, have available to you that you can just, use or add to it. Whatever's going to make the caregiving journey a little bit easier. And I know, again, that's broad, but if there's an app that you can download that's simply going to play music at a specific time that will be helpful for you, it might be as simple as that, or having one of the in-home options that can play a story for your loved one while you're busy, doing some of the in-home tasks.
I'd like to just add to that. Just when it comes to apps, of course, it's trying to solve for a challenge usually. I also evaluate it based on what is that emotion, okay, that you're going to get from that app. And in caregiving, a lot of caregivers are trying to find something that gives them confidence, reduces the fear. These are some of the key emotions I'm throwing out, okay, that reduces that being worried that I forget to give them medication. Okay, so I kind of say, okay, what are the emotions you're also looking for and solving for? It's not something that's talked about a lot, but it is something I love to talk about, to say, did that app that I could find my dad and know that he's at the coffee shop right now reduce my fear? Did it increase my confidence? Right? Yes. Okay, so that's an app that I'm looking for. So I know, like John put one app here, another locating app is called What 3 Words. So it's the question of what apps do people use? What 3 words is something that John mentioned. I haven't used that one there before, but it comes back to if What 3 Words, if Life 360, if We Track that I use, if that reduces my fear and it increases the confidence, then any of those apps are fine with me. It's just a question of, yeah. And then one tip also is look at the reviews. Always look at the app reviews. If it's getting 1 star, 2 stars, then probably it's time to move on. Right? That's an easy way.
There's another question here in the Q&A box, just about apps as well. And it says, is there an app that allows me to change the alarm on my wife's phone remotely?
So that's a tech question. Chances are, if that's an iPhone or an Android, no. Okay, here's the trick. Okay, how do you also use technology to your advantage? I'd probably say, so the answer is no. So sometimes you're going to get a no. We're not there with the technology to remotely do that. But alarm sometimes irritates the caregiver. Sometimes you don't even want to get a call from your loved one, okay, because they keep calling. I kind of sometimes say, have fun with it. Change that ringtone to something that's funny, something that's less stressful, because that is a trigger to you as well. That if it's something like, rah, 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 right, change it to something like, pick a cartoon character that you like, or whatever that reduces that. It's not going to solve fully, the stresses you might have, but you got to use some of these triggers in a lighter way. So not really answering that question fully. Well, I think I did, that there is nothing that I know of that can remotely change that, but I'm answering another, alert kind of answer. Find fun ringtones. And sometimes you want different ringtones. Okay, so you might want one just from that person, and then you want another ringtone from maybe the doctor. Okay, another ringtone from someone else, so that okay, I'm hearing that, I don't need to go get that right now. That's my uncle calling, that it's not a priority. So yeah. And I know, Lindsay, we're going to hang out here for if anyone who has any other questions, like throw them all out. If some of you have to go, thank you again. I know, Jenny, we're quite appreciative, and McCormick Dementia Services. But I know some people, this is your chance to just throw anything out there, and we'll see what we could respond to for the next 10 to 15 minutes.
I do see one here from Angela, just asking a few pieces of advice for people living and their caregivers living with dementia, limited finances, resources. lower income and time strapped, which, you know, I would say a lot of caregivers are in this situation. The first thing that comes to mind for me is the local, if you're in the London area, the Consistory Club. You know, again, technology isn't just apps and smartphones, it's also devices. And for Ron, I'm not sure if you know, but the Consistory Club, it's a place where caregivers can bring equipment, items that they've used that they no longer need, and it's a borrowing club basically. And I know it was really amazing. They moved locations during the pandemic and they were still accepting items back, but because of the cleaning procedures, they weren't able to give them out until this year. And the amount of stuff they have is just unbelievable. So I will definitely send some more information to Allison and Lindsay about the Consistory Club. So for devices in particular, I'm not sure if Ron, you have any additional ideas about, you know, technology for that piece.
Yeah, so thanks, Angela. And yeah, you're coming from the Southwest Partners community, so you're in the London area, I could tell. So this, I'll be blunt about this, that I work at other levels regarding policy at national levels, that I'm going to say this straight out, that technology is not fair. Okay, so some will have technology and some will not be able to access it. There's this thing called the digital divide. Okay, meaning that if you have technology, okay, I'll give an example. You could have a pen. If you have a pen and someone doesn't have a pen and they're at school, you're going to have an advantage over that person, right? So that's old style technology. You know, all this other stuff that's out there. Okay, yeah, so that's the first thing I'm going to say, that it's not going to be fair. Okay, by shouting a little bit louder, by going to different groups, and if there's programs out there like this one there, Jenny, which I've heard a few here and there, that's great. So there is technology out there, and the beauty of technology is it could be reused. Okay? The question is, can you find a program that offers that, or can you actually reach out to your network, okay, to say, hey, can you support me and find, you know, I don't need the latest phone. I need one that could have been 3 years ago that'll still do the job. Okay, you could get a phone that's like from 10 years ago that will play the music you need, for example. So that's just one thing. But I come back to, when it comes to caregiving, it's not just technology. This is everything. Reach out to your community. And if you don't have that big of a community, go out there and keep asking. You're going to find people that want to support you that you don't realize. So that's one strategy. Again, there's others where if there's a program in your area, you got to just find that. But if there isn't, then I would say, hey, who's in my circle, not just even in the London area, who's my family or friends outside that I can say, I need a little bit of help and this technology will help me, or this tool. So that's what I'm going to suggest there, to crowdsource, to get the community to support you.
Awesome. Thanks, Ron. There's a couple other questions here. There's just two more. Someone was wondering, you know, did you have any tips or tricks on GPS and locating devices for folks that maybe won't carry their phone on them or won't carry their device? And I have one thing that comes to mind is I think we've had a caregiver that actually, she's a bit of a seamstress, I guess, and she actually sewed pockets onto a certain, I don't know if it was a shirt or a jacket, so that she could slip the tile in there. And I don't know if it was a Velcro, but she was able to actually kind of sew it into a piece of clothing, which was helpful. But I don't know if you guys have any other thoughts around getting those devices to stay with people.
Jenny, any thoughts? And then I'll give you my thoughts.
Yeah, that's Lindsay, very similar to where my thought went. I know it's and I know there are also some folks that, you know, think about the moral dilemma. Can I do this? You know, we haven't really touched on that piece too much tonight, but you know, putting a piece of GPS, if it means safety for that individual, is of course up to their caregiver. But it might be, if it's a need and there is the risk there and it will ensure that you do know where they are. Yeah, trying to apply it to the person, you know, to a piece of clothing, maybe putting it, if is there something they do carry with them? You know, they always take their wallet. Can you put the tile in their wallet? Can you have that piece of technology always like underneath? I know there's always insoles in shoes. Can you put it between the shoe and the insole? But you have to get creative. And I don't know, Ron, if you've had, if your dad was willing to carry any of those devices or how that went, but.
So there is that ethical conversation that we didn't come up with any technology, right? So even just I had cameras at my dad's place, but I got permission from mom. And my dad, when we started this, he was still in a position that he could say, you know what, if that means I could stay at home longer and safer, I'm good with that, okay? So right now, the answer is it really depends on your situation, but could also be legal concerns, or it actually could make it worse. I'll give you this unique one here, where someone did hide a GPS on the father, okay, in the car as well. And then what happened was someone who's living with dementia has the right to go out as well, right? And they also have the right to live with risk. That's the other thing, right? We've emphasized, which I think is extremely important, safety, but we do have the right to live with risk if we want to be out there. That is our right as well. So this person actually went out there, and then they realized where this person was going. So he was going to his mistress, okay? And that then screwed up. That's not what they're expecting. And then that just threw everything off in that family, right? But was that illegal of him doing that? No. Is that a moral issue? Yes, a family issue. But again, that's something that we got to be careful of. My quick answer to also the audience here is, okay, if you don't have dementia, the caregiver, and I said, hey, by the way, Jenny, I want to track you right now. I'm going to put this on you. Are you okay with that? Right? I'll put it on you, Allison. I'll put it on you, Lindsay, and I'm going to track you just to make sure you're safe, right? Well, then that becomes an issue, right? Where's that line? So there is no clear answer on that there, but where you can put it on, yes. So some kind of sew it in, they kind of make it obvious. That's the biggest challenge of tracking devices, is where do you put it on? But not just where you put it on, it's how do you even charge it, okay? Because some devices, many people have been found deceased, sometimes in long-term care. It's just because they were found outside, they had the GPS device, but no one charged it, okay? So technology is not perfect. The answer is where do you put it? It really depends on the situation, okay? On a keychain, which worked for my dad, okay? It really depends. That's why you got to do trial and error. And if it doesn't work, return it, okay? If you can, if you have that return period and say, this isn't working, let's return it.
That's great. Thanks, Ron. I see we just have 2 more questions here in the question box, so maybe we'll just try and knock those 2 off. This one asks, are there any independent references for inexpensive tablets or computers with good volume and screen resolution and brightness for a person living with dementia?
I think that depends on your community. The pandemic became a big issue where just access to technology, whether you're a student in school, whether you're an older adult that just needs to communicate. So I don't have an answer depending on your community. And there's always a program out there, refurbished, reused. I would still say, fine, you need a tech person on your care team, okay, at this stage, if you want to move forward. Okay, that could be, again, the OT, okay, the Jenny, but then I would also say not just Jenny, get someone who might work in some of these technology stores. I'll just throw them out, whether it's Best Buy, whether it is, well, Best Buy is the big one there, but find them, okay, and then ask them to help you out, okay, what's out there. So it's not really giving an exact answer, but there are.
Well, yeah, and telling them, what a price range might be too, and they might be able to come up with something, and, or they would know where the refurbished, I think of places like even Facebook Marketplace, or, places where people might be getting new technology, but they no longer need something and they're selling them for less money. And what the best volume is for you might not be the same for me. So having a chance to try the item as well.
Another strategy is to find those families that are close to you that are always buying the high-tech stuff, the newest and the latest, okay? Because they're ahead, and then they have their spare ones. Many of them are sitting in their desk. So that's another strategy, to find those that are a little bit ahead, who like the latest stuff. Lindsay?
I think we're going to wrap it up there. Thank you again so much for sharing your experiences and your knowledge. It's been so great. And thank you to everybody who's joined us today for the session, all of the attendees. We really appreciate your attendance. Just a quick plug, we actually really value your feedback. So those of you who attended, you'll be receiving an email with a link to a survey. If you don't mind filling that out for us, that would be fantastic. Appreciate that feedback always. And please stay in touch and look forward to some of our webinars coming up again this fall. So once again, a big thank you to everyone, and I wish you all a great night.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you guys very much.
Thanks so much.